if you took away the grains when there was a goddamn famine going on, what did you want them to have? Did you think they were going to Disneyland without eating any food? Indian population boom हुआ तो Winston Churchill sperm donate कर रहा था क्या?
गिरि नंदिनी नंदित मेदिनी विश्व विनोदिनी नंदिनुते गिरिवर विंध्य शिरोदिनी वासिनी विष्णु विलासिनी जिष्णुनुते.
The real criticisms of Churchill are quite easy to sum up, and I do so in the War on the West. I say these are the things that they now use against him. Didn't do enough to avert the Bengal famine in 1943, for instance. That's been shot down by numerous historians, including Indian historians.
Okay, first problem here, that apparently some Indian historians have shot down the idea that Churchill is to be blamed at all for the Bengal famine. And here we don't actually have a disagreement of facts. We have a disagreement on the interpretation of facts and the ethos behind what happened. Okay, check this out.
In the middle of the war, in the middle of a world war, Churchill did what he could to get grain supplies diverted from Australia to Bengal. The famine was appalling. It was caused by a typhoon. It was not caused by Winston Churchill.
Yes. The typhoon was not caused by Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill did not do some yagya ke aao lao yahan pe typhoon. That much is agreed upon. I think it's a mistake of rhetorics that if someone says that Winston Churchill ke wajah se wo typhoon hua tha, blame him for that. We blame him for his response to the typhoon, not for creating the typhoon. Okay, that much should be clear. I think Douglas Murray did not read this viewpoint clearly enough, that we are not saying that he made up the typhoon out of his mind. Okay. Secondly, his response to the typhoon has been unfair and led to the deaths of 3.4 million people. Why? He diverted the grains for his soldiers fighting in World War II. Now, firstly, उसका morals और ethics तो छोड़ो, बाद में decide करेंगे. पहली बात है कि World War II में तुम्हारा लड़ कौन रहा था? वहाँ पे तो ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा इंडियंस थे. ब्रिटिश आर्मी कहाँ था? ब्रिटिश आर्मी में कितने लोग थे? इंग्लैंड का पॉपुलेशन क्या है? इंडियंस तो गए थे लड़ने. तो जिस देश का लोग जा रहा है तुम्हारा युद्ध लड़ने के लिए, उसी देश के पॉपुलेशन को, जनरल पॉपुलेशन को तुम ग्रेन्स नहीं दे रहे हो. ओके, दैट्स द ह्यूज अनएथिकल एंड इवल थिंग दैट चर्चिल डिड. सेकेंडली, व्हाट वर यू डूइंग वर्ल्ड वॉर II फॉर? टू प्रिवेंट नाजिज्म. नाजिज्म में क्या हुआ? 6 million पीपल डाइड. उसको प्रिवेंट करने में यहाँ पे क्या किया? 3.4 million बंगाली हिंदू मर दिया. ओके, मे बी यू थिंक दैट्स जस्टिफाइड के अच्छा 6 million बचाने के लिए 3.4 million मरना ठीक था, मगर युद्ध में तो और भी लोग मारे गए. तुम्हारे साइड से मारे गए, इंग्लैंड के साइड से मारे गए, सोवियत यूनियन के साइड से मारे गए. वो सब मिला के 6 million जूस बचाने के लिए did you end up justifying your numbers? Secondly, there was a huge wartime inflation going on at that time. Okay, guess how much percent? 53.8% inflation. Okay, if you read India, that is Bharat. This is one of the things J.S. Deepak addresses in the first chapter itself. Hey, coloniality का nature क्या था? Colonialism में क्या हो रहा था? What was the mindset? One of its features was that European provincialism was being mapped onto the Indian society. Okay, or the colonized societies, which means that यूरोप के अंदर एक देशों के बीच में जो कॉम्पिटिटिवनेस था कि फ्रांस, स्पेन, पोर्तुगल, इंग्लैंड, ठीक है, नेदरलैंड्स, इन सब में जो बवाल है वो बवाल यहाँ पे आके करने लगे. ओके, तो फ्रेंच पार्ट्स ऑफ इंडिया, पोर्तुगीज पार्ट्स ऑफ इंडिया, ब्रिटिश पार्ट्स ऑफ इंडिया, ऑल ऑफ देम आर ऑल्सो कॉन्फ्लिक्ट विथ ईच अदर. एंड देन when they are settling their own problems in Europe, we are also getting affected. तब हमको यहाँ से छोड़ दो. हमारा लोग ले रहे हो, हमारा रिसोर्सेज ले रहे हो, हमारा पैसे ले रहे हो, हमारा टैक्सेस ले रहे हो, मगर हमें ग्रेन्स भी नहीं दे रहे हो, विद द जस्टिफिकेशन के हम तो भाई नाजिज्म को प्रिवेंट कर रहे हैं, कितना बढ़िया काम कर रहे हैं. So that is a hilarious defense of Winston Churchill. And also आज इंडिया का इन्फ्लेशन है 6%. ओके, पीपल हु ब्लेम colonization for Africa's shithole condition today, they should remember that market can solve, a good economics can solve most things, and family values, strong discipline, etc. ओके, 1943 में जिस देश का इन्फ्लेशन रेट था 54.8 या 53.8%, आज वो देश 5th लार्जेस्ट इकोनॉमी है, 8% जीडीपी ग्रोथ रेट है. इस साल भी 5.9% होगा GDP growth rate, which is the highest among all the big economies. Okay, so don't blame everything on colonization.
And the idea that some basically Indian nationalist historians have.
This is also wrong. Indian nationalist historians did not create the discourse against Churchill. Okay, Indian nationalist historians also did that, but it was mostly Marxist post-colonial historians as well. In this case, both historians actually agree that Winston Churchill is to blame here.
Pumped out in recent years, and just anti-Churchill figures, that he actually wanted Indians to die is just total calumny. And when people claim, some people
wanted to die can be argued, isn't it? If you took away the grains when there was a goddamn famine going on, what did you want them to have? Did you think they were going to Disneyland without eating any food? What did you think was going to happen?
Claim that. I mean, there was a few very ignorant scholars, but nevertheless with some credentials, who.
Yes, ignorant scholars nahi hai. This is not an issue of facts. We are agreeing with you on facts. So there's no ignorance here. This is a question of morals, ethics and interpretations. So ignorance is not even a factor here. Douglas Murray is so hilariously wrong here. A gigantic, otherwise gigantic scholar like him.
Who claimed that Churchill wanted the Indian population to basically be genocided. And
yes, you can easily make the case that way.
It's complete nonsense.
But I'm saying, I'm being humble enough to say that you can make a case that way. I'm not saying that it definitely was the case, because we shall never know. So I'm showing the humility, and I think everyone else should show the humility that yes, that might have been the case, that might not have been the case. How are you so sure that he was such a nice man? He did not want 3.4 million Bengali Hindus to die.
It's not least by the fact that during the period which in question the Indian population boomed. So that's one of the main ones. Another one is that he had
Indian population boom हुआ तो Winston Churchill sperm donate कर रहा था क्या?
Some views that we now would regard as racist. He definitely regarded races as being of different characters, and that there were superior races, and the as it were, the white European was a superior culture. He was born in Victorian England, so he had some Victorian attitudes.
Okay, fair enough. ठीक है, लोगों का views evolve हो ही सकता है. As I say repeatedly that you don't have to agree or disagree with everyone on everything. ठीक है, विंस्टन चर्चिल बुढ़ा आदमी था, उस समय में बड़ा हुआ था, इसलिए उसको लगा होगा कि white races are superior. Fine enough, fair enough. Then why do you people vehemently hate the Hindu caste system? Because he said this even in his interview with Vivek Ramaswamy. They were discussing that how different societies are different, different cultures are different, and how people being equal in the eyes of God is uniquely a Western character. Giving example of that, Douglas Murray says to Vivek Ramaswamy that I have been to Japan. It's a absolutely great place to live or visit, but it's not exactly Western society. You can tell that because there are some always obvious differences. Then I went to India, and I saw that it's not exactly the West, because there you are not even equal in the eyes of God. So he's obviously hinting at caste system. तो वो कास्ट सिस्टम में तुम्हारा ये जस्टिफिकेशन कहाँ गया कि अच्छा वो लोगों ने किया होगा, आज का इंडिया में तो कास्ट सिस्टम नहीं है. हाँ, तब तो पूरा का पूरा मनुस्मृति में ये लिखा है, मनुस्मृति में वो लिखा है. ठीक है, लेकिन विंस्टन चर्चिल को डिफेंड करेंगे क्योंकि ठीक है बेचारे विक्टोरियन इंग्लैंड में बड़े हुए थे तो क्या करें.
These are things in the negative side of the ledger, and as with all history, you should have a negative and a positive side of the ledger.
हाँ, नेगेटिव साइड ऑफ द लेजर. तो भाई मनुस्मृति और हिंदुइज्म का क्या पॉजिटिव साइड ऑफ द लेजर क्या है? पॉजिटिव साइड ऑफ द लेजर है कि हाँ पुसी है, एक गाल इधर दे दो, थप्पड़ मार दो, सर्वधर्म समभाव, धर्म हिंसा तथैव च. ये है पॉजिटिव साइड, और नेगेटिव साइड है कि कास्टिज्म है, और बाकी कुछ नहीं है बीच में.
Positive side of the ledger includes he almost certainly did more than any one human being to save the world from Nazism. So that should count.
अरे ये एक्चुअली ठीक नहीं है. सोवियत यूनियन did the most in actual fighting against Nazism.
To something. And one of the reasons I talk about Churchill in this regard is to stress that if you get, I'm not trying to stop anyone doing history at all. I don't think that the revisionism of recent years about Churchill or the founding fathers of America or anyone else is anything I want to stop. I find it interesting.
अरे भाई ये false equivalency क्यों? थॉमस जेफरसन, बेंजामिन फ्रैंकलिन या जॉर्ज वाशिंगटन का जो क्रिटिसिज्म है from today's Marxist historians is not on the same lines or based on the same things as their criticism of Winston Churchill. Just because they are criticizing both these ancient historical great figures does not mean that those arguments are equally fine. Okay, I am ready to concede that yes, George Washington had slaves, that yes, Winston Churchill might have been racist. Okay, I am ready to concede that. But why are you equating all these criticisms? That is not the same. George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson did not cause the death of 3.4 million people. Or as you would say, that they avoided saving 3.4 million people. Okay, that's not what George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson did. So don't muddy the waters and falsely implicate all these Marxist historians together. There are different criticisms, there are different justifications. Winston Churchill is objectively more blamable than anything George Washington and Thomas Jefferson might have done.
I find it interesting, not least because it's so sloppy on occasions, but I find it interesting and it's important. And we should be able to see people in the round. But that includes recognizing the positive side of the ledger. And if you can't recognize that side, you're doing something else. It's not history. It's some form of politicking of a very particular kind. And I think it's the same thing with the Founding Fathers. There are some people, for instance, certainly since the 90s, who have pushed the Sally Hemings.
Okay. Amritangshu Jha made a great point here, which reminded me another thing actually. He's saying that Abhijit Ayar Mitra in a podcast said that industrialization of Bengal was a major factor in Bengal famine. Not just that one major famine, but sequence of many around that time. Any idea about its accuracy? Okay, first that Abhijit Ayar Mitra is usually right about these things. Okay, I don't have any reason to counter him on the history of this particular aspect. But yes, what you reminded me is what is my counter to Douglas Murray as well. That there were countless famine after famine after famine. पहली बात तो ये सब बार famine शुरू हुआ था शाहजहां मुगल किंग्स आने के बाद, क्योंकि इनको ट्रेजरी कोष राशन करना नहीं आता था, कैसे कंजर्व करे, कैसे गोडाउन में मेंटेन करे, कैसे रखे. तो दे वर वेरी बैड एट मैनेजमेंट ऑफ दीज स्टॉक्स. So right before Bengal famine, there was a famine in 1700, late 1700s. There was a famine in 1800s. Then there was 1943 famine. There were about, I think, 20 famines in 200 years. So there was a pattern of mismanagement. तो लास्ट वाला जो famine हुआ 1943 में, उसमें विंस्टन चर्चिल ने खाने नहीं दिया लोगों को, क्योंकि वो नाजिज्म प्रिवेंट कर रहा था. That's the criticism. He did not create just one famine, but remember that Bengal, that the British government were stupid enough to let countless famines happen.
Jaya Jaya